Hello, everyone who's watching. Good morning, afternoon. My name is MJVanPraag. I am your host today, assisted by Kirsten Cole, and our guest is Carolyn Elliott. I do interviews, videos, panels on YouTube since 2012 about from a passion to take things out of the shadows, shine light on taboos, a passion for integration, help people have the lives they want, and the realm of taboo is usually alive in the areas of intimacy, sex, power. So those are usually my topics. I am also myself a passionate shadow worker. I come from a very open-minded, progressive culture. To give you an example, a man in my home country, the Netherlands, who is a very famous television host with a lot of prestige, just similar to Oprah. His name is Isha Meyer. Unfortunately, he died a few years ago. He was a very, very dynamic and bright interviewer. He would share in his bios everywhere about his personal life, that he was in a fabulous relationship with his partner, who was also a well-known artist, and that besides that, he would often see prostitutes. And this is something that he would just announce with pride. And that is an example of owning your shadow. And I also had a very big secret life when I grew up, actually in Holland in my 20s. And a lot of my work has been to own those shadows and those secret parts that I wanted to hide. And I'm even thinking about writing a book about that part of myself. So that about me, my involvement in shadow work. We're going to talk a lot more about this. I welcome you, Carolyn. You are an author, the author of the book Existential Kink. You have been teaching seminars for many years about transformation. You help people transform their life through working with the psyche and working with the shadow. Obviously, your genius is in the area of shadow work. It's very obvious. Welcome to this dialogue.
Thank you, Max. What a kind introduction.
Yes, and Kirsten Cole, who's also here, you are assisting me today, and you are a Martha Beck trained life coach, and you have a lot of passion for nature, for conservation. It's good to have you here, and you're also a fan of Carolyn's work, and you read the book. And I have to say, I also read the book. Not only the hard copy, I used actually both Audible, because I really liked hearing it in your voice. That actually made a big difference. Just I am very auditory, and when I hear somebody's voice, it gives me a whole download more on information about what you're talking about than what you put in your words. So I was using the Audible. I was also using the book because I always make notes and take notes in all my books. And I recommended it to quite a few people, and some people came back and said, "Oh, I'm really not into BDSM." And I said, "Well, this is not a book about BDSM. Existential Kink is not a book about how to be a better dom or sub or pain slut, although there is some of that in the book, but it's really a book about transformation and working with the shadow."
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you agree with me, Carolyn, that this is not a book about kink.
No, not just, well, when most people think about BDSM or kink, they think about, fun bedroom dungeon stuff, getting tied up and whipped and everything. That was the initial inspiration for Existential Kink. I had a lot of pain in my life at the time that I came up with all of this. And I was thinking about people in BDSM communities, and wow, they set up these scenes and these containers where they're able to enjoy intense sensations that ordinarily maybe they wouldn't. And I just began to get curious, like, I wonder if it's possible for me to enjoy the pain in my life in the same way that people enjoy intense sensations or power dynamics in BDSM, and can I give approval to it, and can I experience it as a kind of pleasure? And I found that I could, and that's where the transformative realizations began.
And reading your book, Carolyn, and this had my interest. You also have noticed that your identity, which did have something to do with kink in the beginning, shifted. That your sexual identity and your identity in an intimacy dynamic was shifting.
Well, yeah. So a big part, I would say the main way that my identity has shifted is I really used to see myself as very put upon by the world. I guess I had what you might call kind of like a victimhood identity. And, I had experienced tough things growing up, like very many people have, but I really, really felt like the world owed me something and I was being constantly wronged. And I would wind up in relationships with men who were very controlling and very jealous, at which resonated with the part of me that felt that something about me was wrong and awful and needed to be controlled. And it was interesting because as long as I told myself, oh, I hate these relationship dynamics, I hate being controlled, this is so terrible, I kept being drawn back into those kind of dynamics. And the minute I was like, you know what? Actually, I think a part of me might love this. And I think it's okay for me to let myself feel the pleasure here, even though this relationship is destructive and if telling myself that it's wrong and that I should get out of it hasn't helped me yet. So what if I go to the opposite end and just really, really
It was
shamelessly
a consensual dynamic. You were not in a
go?
consensual.
No, so here, my story. So the controlling, lousy relationships that I were in, they were not constructed BDSM situations with safe words and all that beautiful stuff. They were just free-form improvisational theater of, which that kind of dark, yucky relationship dynamic, which can veer into the abusive, is something that I think a lot of people have experienced, maybe more people than often talk about it, but yeah. So it was partly me being able to free myself from that and become able to have more healthy relationships involved ending my shaming of that part of me that enjoyed feeling controlled or, um, and now with my husband, I'd say we have a pretty darn healthy relationship, and we do go into that deliberately with, bedroom kink and safe words and all that beautiful stuff. But previously, it was something that I just enacted unconsciously.
Yeah, I got it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, any type of integrational work. Um, I heard in the talk you gave on your Facebook group somebody asking about internal family systems, which I'm very familiar with, which is a part psychology about bringing the different parts, being in communication with the different parts of yourself, and never labeling yourself one way or another, but always acknowledging that there are many parts in the game, and that you have to kind of be the leader of those different parts in your subconscious. If you, for example, take a man who has an addiction to porn, to child porn, that is a problem in our society. So there's hopefully a method that can help him integrate in a way that he no longer needs child pornography. Because if he continues to need that, he's going to be arrested whether he touches a child or not. This is a big taboo in our country.
Yes, I have some thoughts about that. No, I mean, they're not any kind of scientifically proven anything, but when I ponder that situation, folks who are attracted to that kind of material, what comes to me is that they're alienated from their own softness and tenderness and receptivity. And so they're very, illicitly attracted to those kinds of pornographic images where there's, they're receiving pleasure from seeing somebody else's tenderness and innocence and receptivity be violated. So I'm not exactly sure what the process of that integration would be like because I haven't had to go through it myself, but I do suspect that it would involve those people coming to greater connectiveness with their own vulnerability and their own tenderness so that they're able to have empathy instead of that kind of alienated, painful sort of approach to that.
Or being in kind of a forum like yours where they could openly speak about, but probably without being condemned, or in a group where it is safe to talk about it. So that might be. I mean, it's not my situation, but
Well, in my existential kink group, people do talk about some very intense, charged
yeah.
subjects. And I like to think, we do our best to hold a container of being respectful and kind to everyone. It's true, though, that there are some subjects that are more highly charged than others. So so I don't try to hold out the promise of holding an absolutely safe space because I figure, on planet Earth, there really is no such thing. That's why vulnerability and risk and all of these things are real brave decisions that people have to make. So I'm just trying to imagine right now if somebody opened up about that in my Facebook group, it might cause quite a stir, and I would be, I would want to respect that person for seeking help, but that kind of help might be better sought from a therapist, for example.
For sure. So, so you do monitor your Facebook group, and you sometimes interject. Yes.
Yes, we do. I have a wonderful coach named Sheena who I've trained, and she runs the Facebook group. And like I said, we don't usually take down anybody's posts for sharing what's going on with them, only if they get into big name-calling arguments with other people.
Carolyn, there is a term that that came across when I did some research about you and things you have done, and that term really grabbed my attention, and I'd like you to speak about that. The term is a force of nature, being the force of nature, and this shows up in titles of seminars that you've taught. Can you please speak to that? I am fascinated by that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So to me, what that term conjures up, obviously, it evokes the sense of something very strong, very primal and intense, like lightning or a hurricane or literal forces of nature, right? A tiger's hunger. And to me, in a sort of personal growth or magical context, like my course, Force of Nature, is all about learning how to unify our will so that we can have that same kind of intense impact in the world, same as lightning strikes or hurricanes, that we're not toning ourselves down or protecting other people from feeling the full impact of our creativity and our strength.
That's clear. Yeah, that's also what's, and so the opposite of being a force of nature would be being fragmented, or internally divided between parts that are fighting with each other, that are not getting along, or that would be the opposite of being of a force of nature. Yeah.
Yeah, which is the state that most of us start out in, right? Like, I feel like it's very, very common for us to have, we have very strong conscious intentions, like plans of things to do, but then we don't have our unconscious on board with it, so we're not as effective as we want to be.
Having one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake.
Exactly.
Is a tangible way of saying that.
Yeah, so what I aim to do is show people how to drive without, without stopping themselves like that. To stop themselves with precision when instead of just,
So
being stuck at the gate.
I do my own transformational work around wealth blueprint, and I tried on your exercises, and I couldn't really feel any sexual pleasure, barely any relief, and I started thinking, really the key is really the beliefs that are deeply embedded in the subconscious, and that we want to release and just put in uh, put in some better stuff that will attract, we have all these subconscious stuff why we may not be attracting wealth, like breaking the family code, or my father said, people with a lot of money, they're probably not honest, they don't have integrity, they accumulate that money by cheating, and so I got a lot of those beliefs, and I didn't really see how there is pleasure attached to me going into that. I just want to really imprint something else into my mind.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I guess when hearing that, something that I would be curious about though would be what it would take for you to give some approval or love to the parts of yourself that are dishonest or cheating or lying.
I see. Yes.
So in Existential Kink, the meditation as I teach it does involve going within and seeing if one can allow oneself to feel any pleasure that might exist in some negative states. For me, it was scarcity. I found that I actually had a lot of pleasure attached to scarcity and anxiety and proving myself. There's a lot of other shadowy things that can be going on. And of course, integration work is all ultimately about finding the approval that takes something out of the unconscious, because shame is what usually sticks it in there, right? That's what keeps it stuck. So I don't know about for you, but I would imagine for me, if I was walking around with a very strong imprint of, I can't be wealthy because wealthy people are all big liars and cheaters, and I can't be a liar and a cheater, one of the first places that I would begin would be finding some loving, compassionate, humorous approval for the ways in which I am a liar and a cheater, and maybe spending some time focusing on stories of tricksters and the power that comes from that and the beauty that comes from that, until I felt like I didn't have to block out that side of me and block out the creativity and the wealth that might come with it.
Thank you. That's helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
How would we define the shadow? How would you define the shadow?
Well, so it's interesting. Jung, so I refer back to Jungian psychology. So Jung talked about it in a whole lot of different ways at different times. And in one seminar, he pretty much identified it with the whole unconscious. He was like shadow and unconscious, same thing. And of course, the unconscious has other characters in it, like the anima and the animus and all of the archetypal things. But so in one sense, the shadow is just whatever we are not usually consciously identified with. So we have this ego, which is like the tippy top of the iceberg, right? And then we have this whole giant iceberg underneath the ocean of the unconscious that contains the bulk of who we are and the part of us that dreams at night. Specifically, I tend to think of the shadow as whatever the ego does not want to associate itself with, does not want to. So it contains the opposites of everything that we consciously want. So consciously, I imagine, say, for example, you might want to be a person of integrity. That would mean that there might be an equal and opposite desire in your unconscious to be a nasty cheat. Likewise, for many, many years, I thought that I only wanted wealth and abundance and all of that good stuff. But it turned out I had an equally strong desire, an unconscious, shadowy desire to experience scarcity and deprivation and all of that. So the general principle is, what do I not want to be associated with? And whatever that is, it's in
That's where the treasure is.
The
stuff that you're trying to hide.
Yes, and I think it's very helpful for people to understand that all of us humans have every quality inside of us, right?
No, it's really great. I was listening yesterday to Dr. John Martini, who has very interesting things to say. And
I love him.
He said when a single person is looking for a relationship, he has them do an exercise, write down everything you want in a partner, all the fantasies and dreams and everything the good things you want to see in a partner, and then make another list with all the opposites of that. So you want a person who's very devoted, then on the opposite list, you may there's a person who's very avoidant or unavailable, or and then go around looking in your life for those qualities on both lists, and you see you'll find that you already have everything you were looking for in the people you know, and the people that are already in your life. All those qualities, they may not be in one person, but it's very interesting. He works with good qualities and bad qualities. He has different processes. Very interesting. He's very interesting to look this guy up. Yeah.
One of the reasons I love John Martini is I think of a lot of the modern day self-help people. John Martini, almost more than anybody else, really understands what Jung called the philosopher's stone, or the formation of our relationship to the divine that happens when we reconcile the opposites inside of us. And I love Martini's thoughts about that. And one of the things that I love about that exercise that you just described is part of what it helps to do is to help me realize, oh, all of these qualities are already present in various people in my life. I'm already fulfilled by these qualities. I'm a fulfilled person. I'm not a lacking person. And magically speaking, that lets synchronicities of fulfillment line up. Whereas previously, when I'm not seeing that, I'm going around thinking of myself as sort of a pitiable, lacking person. And then that's what tends to show up.
One of the things that stood out for me in your book was what you said about people identifying with the dominant because they actually want to be significant. I mean, being significance is a real need that some of us have. We in relationship, we want to be seen as important and significant. There's nothing wrong with that. And you said you can look for ways you can be significant to people in different ways, not just in a fixated role thing, and you know, the guy with the whip, or but you can look for significance. How can you be significant and actually add humor to that, and something gracious? Or I don't know how you say. I forgot how you actually say it, but I really like how you said it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So to go into that a little bit more, I think maybe what you're referring to is the section on sadism, where I talk about all of these ways that we human beings tend to be unconsciously sadistic to each other. So a simple example, one that I encounter a lot with my hippie friends, is just always being late, just late, late, late all the time. And of course, they're very good-hearted people and they would never want to hurt anyone, but then they're wasting your time, right? And which is a kind of hurt. And one way that I like to think about that, and that I've worked with it in myself, is what I'm doing when I'm doing that is I'm inflicting sensation on others. And I'm inflicting, right, a sense of I'm important, or I'm more significant, or you have to wait for me. And the flip side of that, the more wholesome side, is that all creativity has a sadistic element, in that every song, every play, every movie, every book is creating sensation in the audience, right? Even every conversation or every meal gives sensation. And I find that there's a way in which, when people feel inhibitions around their creativity and they're reluctant to let themselves be fully felt, whether in art or in conversation, that tends to show up in these sort of sideways, unconscious, sadistic habits of, you know, being mean, or always being late, or it comes out sideways. So part of the work of integration is not to disown the part of myself that might want to inflict sensation on other people, or inflict a sense of, look how important I am, but instead that channels it in a way that's more direct, more honest, and more complete, and ultimately perhaps even uplifting, as much art can be. So one example that I think of is the Sistine Chapel, you know, by Michelangelo. I walked in there, I was crying like a baby. It was intense. And in that sense, you know, Michelangelo was sadistically doming me with the painful beauty of all creation, right? I imagine that he was fully expressed in that way, and he probably didn't need to impose himself sadistically on people in other ways because he was doing it so fully and directly through his very meaningful art.
I want to gradually get into some questions. We already had a question that showed up on underneath our post on your Facebook group of Heather, who was asking for other ways to expand havingness besides what the book already talks about.
There's a lot of processes in the book, Heather, until you've tried them all. I mean, I think all of John DeMartini's processes are excellent, Heather, so that's one place to look. I also really like the work of Byron Katie. So for example, questioning my thoughts, my judgments about money and about clients and how the world works, and my thoughts about men and relationships, and sort of dismantling the false limiting beliefs was very helpful to expanding my happiness level. One practice that I talk about in the book that's, I don't know, maybe Heather didn't see it yet, is called Deepest Fear Inventory, and that's helped me a lot. And the way that works is you just sort of write at the top of a sheet of paper, "Dear Universe," or God, or however you like to address divinity, "I hate and resent blank," and then you fill in the blank with what you think you want, what you want to expand your havingness level to. So, "Dear Universe, I hate and resent having $1 million." And then you start to write a list of deep fears. Because I have deep fear that because I have deep fear that I. So, "Dear Universe, I hate and resent having $1 million because I have deep fear that I'm unwilling to feel the envy of other people, because I have deep fear that this means that I'm a lying cheater." So you start to write as if you already had this, and what do you not like about having it? And get at least 20 of those as quickly as you can out of your system. And at the end, you write a little prayer, something along the lines of, "Dear Universe, please remove these fears. I pray for knowledge of your will for me and the power to carry it out." And then you read that out loud to a friend, and they say, "Thank you for your honesty." And you say, "Thank you for listening." And then you just rip that up into little pieces and do that over and over again. And the process works through boredom. So eventually you get so bored of writing out these fears that you just kind of strip them away like a layer of paint. So this is work that I did myself in order to make $1 million last year. I did this over and over and over again. And, eventually I was like, I don't even care if people envy me anymore. I'm totally willing to feel people envy me. Okay, sure. I'm totally willing to get down with the trickster parts of myself. Just by writing those fears down and reading them out loud and ripping them up over and over again, the fear starts to go away, because it's another means of making the unconscious conscious. Whereas previously those fears I might not have been even aware of them until I take the time to see what it is that I'm associating, what terrible things I'm associating with the beautiful thing that I ostensibly want.
Nice. Yeah. Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Kirsten, do you see any comments or questions that?
Yeah, I don't see any comments on our live stream. However, I had 2 people message me questions for later. So we have one from...
Everybody watching on the live stream, feel free to write questions. That's on my Facebook page. Write questions underneath the post with the live streaming, and Kirsten will pick them up. If you have any question or thing you want to ask us.
Yes, I'd love to relay those. We also have one from Michelle, who said, "I can't always locate the charge in my body when doing existential kink. How can I get in touch with this?"
So this is a deep, deep matter. So one way that I experienced this was when I was working on my body image issues. I would try working out. So just to explain a little bit more about existential kink for those who haven't read the book, the basic process is you get in touch with a situation that your ego does not like, that you don't like. And then you set aside about 15 minutes, and you set a little timer, and you lay down somewhere that you won't be disturbed. You bring the don't like situation to mind, and you just sort of gently, curiously experiment with seeing if you can allow yourself to open to experiencing those sensations as pleasurable, or if there's some tiny part of you that feels some enjoyment in it. So sometimes this produces results very quickly for people. They just like really realize it fast. Sometimes not. And for me, I had that experience when I was working with body image stuff, and I would lay down in my existential kink practice with the don't like situation as being like, oh, you know, I don't like being overweight. I don't like feeling like I want to eat a whole pizza and that I do so, you know, and I would go into that and it would be like no sensation whatsoever. And I would be like, man, I mean, I don't like these situations, but I can't find the electric zing. And for me, what worked with that one was coming at it from another angle. So finally I found sort of coming at it from a sadistic angle, finding sadistic joy in imposing feelings of disgust, like imagining that I was imposing feelings of disgust on judgmental people, that they would look at my body and just feel like, oh, that's so, oh, gross. And finding like, you know, just imagining that I was torturing them with my grossness and just reveling in that, like I'm an evil old witch. That I felt a ton of electricity with that, and that moved it very quickly, to the point that, you know, pretty much the next day I felt like changing my diet. And it wasn't like a should, like I have to do this. It was like a genuine desire. I want to eat differently. I want to exercise differently, because embracing that shameless sadistic pleasure moved something that let me get in touch with that clearer underlying desire. So I would say that that is a challenge with existential kink, that sometimes it does take time to find the angle that gives us just the right route into it. So one suggestion I would make would be if the masochistic angle, you know, finding the pleasure in the pain that oneself is experiencing is not accessible, try seeing if you can find some sadistic pleasure in imposing some sort of awfulness on others, even if it may only be imagined. So for example, when I walked down the street, I never had anybody recoil from me in disgust. That was pretty much something that was only happening in my imagination. But still, it needed to be made conscious and celebrated and enjoyed. This is another reason why I recommend the work of Byron Katie as a warm-up for existential kink practice. Because oftentimes in doing the work of Byron Katie around our don't like situations or our stressful situations, it can help us pinpoint, usually through the turnarounds in that process, some sensational statements that we can take into existential kink with us. So for example, I was doing the work of Byron Katie around my judgments with money. And clients. So I was just starting out in coaching, and I was writing a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet on people should want to pay me tons of money for coaching. And then I did the Byron Katie process on it. You know, is that true? Can I know that it's true? How do I react when I believe that thought? Who would I be without that thought? And finally, I came to the turnaround. And so, you know, and turn the statement around to self opposite another, and you try to find 3 ways that the turned around statement is equally as true as the initial statement. So I turned it around to people should absolutely never want to pay me any money for coaching ever. And I just like, my body just responded to that. I was like, yes, they never, ever should. Yes. And I was like, whoa, what is that? And that's when I was like, I think I just need to lay down and just feel into this joyful imagining of nobody ever wanting to pay me ever, and just let myself enjoy that. And soon after I let myself enjoy that, I found a way to start really growing my business and my coaching practice. So it is a bit of a fine art, Michelle. Thank you for the question. And I guess I would just encourage you to persevere and keep trying different angles, different kinds of statements connected to the situation until you find one that's sensational.
Carolyn, I want to go back for a moment to the exercise you just described about the fear inventory. You said that that exercise starts with a negative statement. I hate making $1 million. Why would you not do that exercise with in a positive, saying, okay, my dream is to make $1 million, or
Yeah, so there's different kinds of inventory that are really helpful. deepest fear inventory, the idea for that is based off of a Marianne Williamson quote: "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, it's that we're powerless beyond all measure." So we're sort of, the idea with deepest fear inventory is that we're looking at sort of deep fears connected to how powerful we are. And we're looking at it. So part of the idea with it too is if some part of you was not afraid of it, you would already have it.
But someone may not connect to those words. I hate making $1 million. That may not feel like an authentic statement.
So it's definitely not authentic for your ego.
Yeah.
But here, the thing, so, well, let's zoom in on some coaching for a second. Can we, Max? Can I coach you a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So consciously, would you like to make $1 million? Would that be something that you would like?
Yes. Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say is your degree of desire connected with that, having $1 million? With 1 being very little and 10 being a lot of desire?
7.
7. Okay. So that's a lot of desire. Desire has a lot of strength in it. And usually, unless a desire is counterbalanced by an unconscious fear, we can make it happen pretty easily, right? We're smart, capable people. We can go forward. So the fact that it may not be happening already suggests to me that there might be some part of you that really just hates the idea of having $1 million and has a whole bunch of fears connected with it. And that would not be a conscious part of you. That would be something in the unknown.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. So then, would you like to do some deepest fear inventory?
I'm aware of that. I am aware of the resistance and the beliefs, but I wouldn't say I hate. Well, maybe I can experiment with that. Yeah, but
experiment with it. I resent having $1 million. Imagine that you have $1 million right now. What do you resent about it, and what scares you about it?
Yeah, you see that. I don't see what I would not like about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so that's one of the reasons why, there's a variety of practices and different strokes for different strokes, certainly. Another form is just to do desire inventory. So that's sort of closer to what you were mentioning. So, dear universe, I desire $1 million because it will make me feel. And so that's how I would do that, is like, because it will make me feel this way, because it will make me feel this way, because it will make me feel this way. And then you would end it with something like, and I'm now willing to receive it. So that's a form of inventory for strengthening focus on a given desire.
Yes, and Martha Beck has an exercise, my dream is coming true. And then you write down everything that comes to mind next. No, it can't be true. Or all the resistance, and you write that out. Well, why the dream cannot come true. That's another way to approach that. But I think I can personally do more exploration with what you just told me. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And another thing that I find interesting with having this practice, to go back to the person's question from before, I find that the amount of positive sensation that I'm willing to receive is always tied, sort of in that John D. Martini way, to the amount of painful sensation that I'm willing to receive. So if I'm absolutely not willing to experience discomfort, I will usually limit my range of reception to a very small thing that doesn't let in giant fulfillment or giant joy either. Yeah. And the more I'm willing to experience discomfort, embarrassment, humiliation, the more I'm willing to experience winning and fulfillment and receiving too. Yeah. So that's a big thing with having this practice, is realizing that havingness is about having the full range of sensation in life and not trying to hide from some of it or avoid some of it.
Yeah, there's all this dichotomy or the contrast people think that the submissive person is weak. The submissive person is the strongest in the room.
Mm.
They can handle anything that's coming at them. They're extremely.
Yeah, surrender,
Yeah.
deep reception, deep surrender. So that's another way of thinking about existential kink practice, is it's a matter of deeply surrendering to my current experience in a way where I just let myself feel it and I don't hold myself back from cherishing any part of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kirsten, do you have anything for Carolyn?
It surprisingly muted me all of a sudden. We have one more question that I want to get to from somebody else first. So this is from Allison. And she says, I'm having this intense longing for a different life. What do I do with this? How do I get in touch with what it's trying to tell me?
That's beautiful. Well, so there's longing is a fascinating thing. So there's one approach to it, is spending some time just really writing about and exploring, what is the thing that you're longing for? What would be the vision of life that would really delight you? And then the other side of it that I would probably do would be spending some time just letting myself enjoy the sensation of longing itself, which is a very deep, profound sensation. There's also the way in which I would start to get curious about what in my life I felt that I had to reject, and what about myself I felt that I had to reject. Because it's interesting that the sensation of being fulfilled in life has a lot to do with how much of myself I'm willing to accept. It's sort of just like we were just talking about with our havingness level. If there's a very small range of myself that I'm willing to enjoy and celebrate, usually there will be a very small range of my life that I'm willing to enjoy and celebrate, which can leave me feeling very unfulfilled or starving or longing. So, for example, if I am super judgmental of myself whenever I am less than totally honest, or if I demand perfection, or I'm always disappointed with myself, we tend to project things onto life and the other people in the world at large that we judge about ourselves. So I would want to begin praising and welcoming even the parts of myself that I consider inferior or destructive or socially unacceptable or problematic, because those parts of me have the creative energy that I need in order to experience fulfillment.
Mm.
So I know that that's a little bit abstract, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, I hope so.
Is there anything else?
That was all for the questions from others, but I absolutely have some questions that I'd love to ask Carolyn. And also first, I want to say that I love the book, and I found it to be one of the quickest and freeing shadow work practices that I've ever come across. So I think that if people are resonating with this, and if you read, and if you have a face, you should buy this book. Yeah, I've loved it so far. So I was curious as I was reading your work. A lot of it is about being more honest with ourselves and having the courage to not only face but embrace and love these parts of ourselves like you've been talking about. So I'm curious, have you noticed, as people start to be more honest with themselves, is there a correlation with being more honest with others in their life too?
Yes, generally. And one of the ways that I've seen that take shape with coaching clients that I've had and with people in my courses is that they usually have some kind of creative explosion where, previously they felt like they were kind of containing themselves or, acting in a way that they thought might be acceptable to other people. And then the more they begin to approve of like my power hungry side, my seductive side, my wicked side, my sadistic side, the more then that they're able to receive inspiration. Because I find it very interesting, the more that I do this kind of magical and hermetic work, something that I find so fascinating, it makes sense when I say, well, we'll see how much sense it makes. God, the divine, that, the source through which, where all inspiration comes from, is whole, is the totality, right? So the more I'm willing to expand celebration of the wholeness that I am, including all of these negative, inferior, destructive, unacceptable qualities, the more I am then able to be in communication with that larger divine whole and receive inspiration and receive, the gift of being able to be direct and have integrity. Because, what is integrity? It's wholeness. The word wholesome I find so interesting. My highest aspiration is to be wholesome. And when people hear the word wholesome, they tend to associate that with a kind of saccharine, like Pollyanna, sexless sort of thing. But to me, wholesome, it means whole, like how, and integrity means, that you're of one piece instead of being fragmented. So definitely, the more that we do this work, the more whole and the more honest we can become. I think it was Jung who said something, was it Jung or was it Alan Watts talking about Jung? I think it might have been, my memory gets twisted up, but something about, I think it was Alan Watts said that one of the reasons why Carl Jung was such a healing presence on other people was because you could see there was a twinkle in his eye that he knew exactly how much of a villain he was. And, he wasn't necessarily enacting his villainy all over the place, but he knew himself to be a villain. And so when people told them about, their affairs or their bad habits or, this way that they failed at work or lied to their boss, he'd never, projected judgment like, oh, you're a bad person and I'm not. He just knew that whatever that wickedness was in the other person, it was equally present in him because he had done that exploration and that shadow integration work. So he was able to have when we heal, we make whole. So the more we accept these parts of ourselves, the more of a healing influence we can have on others because they don't feel that they have to hide parts of themselves in our presence because they can feel us. So that definitely, promotes honest, beautiful communication and relationships.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I hear you speaking to both just a massive amount of peace and acceptance and love. And then also it ties to that piece of power, of just pure empowerment. Because again, like that little piece that you brought in earlier, needing nothing to change to be, wildly happy and satisfied in your life. And that is unique, very, very rare and empowering. So I love that.
Thank you. One of the fun thing that came to mind when you said that is I find that what often, if I'm ever in a state of mind where I'm feeling like really like, oh, I hate this is so awful, I'm so dissatisfied, this is miserable, it's usually because there's some part of me has a judgment that if I was the kind of person who enjoyed this situation, who just loved it and was completely happy in it, that would mean that I was stupid, that I was pathetic, that I was lame, dumb, all of these things. So this comes up for me. I have stepkids, and bless them, they're very dear souls. But being a step family can be challenging, and I get annoyed, and there's definitely a part of me that thinks, wow, I would have to be so dumb to enjoy this. Like, what little girl wants to be a stepmother when she grows up? Nobody. And so there must be something wrong with me if I were to enjoy this. But it's like, I know, so that's something that I'm working on right now, because I know that whatever that little weird piece of pride is, it's false. And it's, actually I do really enjoy it, or it wouldn't be present in my life at all. I wouldn't, so yeah, interesting thing. So this process, this work is very humbling, and it usually involves me realizing all the ways that I stop myself from being happy by judging that only stupid people can be happy in my life situation.
Yeah, and I love that.
It's a mother that wants to nurture and.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I am a mother. I have a little baby daughter of my own, and I definitely have nurturing feelings towards my stepsons. They're wonderful, But since they also have a mother already, they're sort of like, oh, we don't need you, lady, you know. Um, there's like a feeling of being superfluous. So who would be dumb or weird enough to enjoy this feeling of being superfluous? Well, secretly me. And, humbling myself and getting in touch with that is part of the work that I need to do.
Kirsten, is there anything else from viewers or from you?
Goodness, nothing from viewers, and I love also just that this work is ever unfolding. We never finished, we've never arrived, like ta-da! It's never complete, and I just love the fact that that it's evolving and you continue to play with it and work with it. So I really like that. And then other than that, I was just my perception is that one of your strengths is community building in both your programs that you offer and the Facebook page and a lot of the recorded workshops that you do. It just seems like a huge strength of your work is this massive community that you've been able to build. And so I would just really love to hear you riff on the importance of community when we're on this either spiritual or personal development path, and how that has influenced your work, your life, and how you see it influence the work and the development of the people in your programs.
Oh, thank you, Kirsten.
Yeah,
I love
about your program that you're launching, which is a community-based program.
Certainly, thank you. Yes, so the program that that's now open for application and registration is called Wealth, and it's a long-term community of magicians who are doing this kind of alchemical work that we're talking about. I can talk more about the bells and whistles of it. There's a lot to it, a lot of socializing, a lot of mentorship and coaching opportunities entailed. But yeah, so one of the ways that I came into, I would say, like a more embodied realization of my magic and feeling more empowered and all of that was very directly in a community context. I was a part of a really astounding community that had a lot to do with sex magic and all sorts of fun stuff for a few years. And I learned a ton and it was tremendously beneficial. And sadly, that community dissolved because the leadership turned out to have some major unintegrated shadows of their own. And there were a lot of scandals and it was this whole big sad thing. And so for a few years after it dissolved, I was sort of bereft. And I was, hanging out at hippie circles like you do. Ayahuasca medicine ceremonies were the closest kind of community I could find to what I had lost, which I love. I love medicine circles very much, but wasn't quite the same. And part of the idea for creating Wealth and my other online programs, now Wealth is sort of the main one, was that I wanted to find a way to give other people the same experience of being held and seen and felt and celebrated in their fullness with all of their sexuality, all of their freakiness, all of their magic. And I wanted that community to be accessible. So it's virtual, and I wanted it to not break the bank, because what had this tragedy that brought down my previous community was that the leaders were very into high pressure sales for like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people were having to get into big debt to be a part of things, and that took them down. So my community, pretty darn accessible. Wealth is $99 a month, and we also have a gifting program, so people who apply and are accepted can give a membership as a gift to somebody who's in hardship or to a friend. And we do a lot of really cool things. We practice Solve and Coagula together each month. We have practices. So we've been talking about practices like Deepest Fear Inventory and Existential Kink and the work of Byron Katie.
What does that mean, Solve?
Yeah, Solve et Coagula is sort of the basic alchemical formula of magic. So it means dissolve, solve, and coagulate, bring together again. So Existential Kink, I consider to primarily be a solve process in that it helps dissolve old patterns, old structures that we've been unconsciously repeating. And then coagula processes are things like visualization, affirmation, rituals, making talismans, creating the new form, the new shape that we want our lives to take. So each month in Wealth, we do one solve practice and one coagula practice together. And they are themed according to the tarot and the zodiac signs of astrology. So in June, we're working with the tarot card, the Lovers, and with the zodiac sign Gemini. And we're going to have solving coagula practices connected to those. And we also have a study seminar at the end of the month where, for those people who are really nerdy like me, I give reading assignments in philosophy, psychology, history, magic. And we read the book, and then at the study seminar, we have sort of like a graduate level discussion of the book, of the reading that we've done, along with workshops throughout the month that support us in our practices, and along with really fun social events called power-ups, where we play communication games that are designed to help people be fully felt, seen, heard. So it is a super fun, electric community. And I like to think that part of my strength as a community builder is I just love awesome weirdos, and awesome weirdos see me waving my flag and they come on down. So they're truly some of the most amazing people in the world. I'm very, very blessed to have joined these communities. And one of the main purposes of them I see is connecting these kind of magicians all over the world. Because one of the big goals that me and my husband have is we want to create a really deep revolution in consciousness where we make the unconscious conscious, and more people know how to do that. And so a flourishing can happen, somewhat like what happened in the Renaissance in Europe.
Yes. So we are at about an hour, and that's also what I had aimed at, to dialogue for about an hour. Carolyn, do you have any final word for viewers? You know, whether they're familiar with shadow work or not, is something you want to pass on as a piece of wisdom.
Yeah, so a few different things. So if you have a pattern or a situation in your life that you really don't like you keep getting into lousy relationships, or you keep getting into scarcity, that can be healed. There are taboo desires underlying those patterns, and you can welcome them and celebrate them, and they are awesome. You can integrate those. That's a main point. Another main point is that it's possible through this work of integration to achieve deliberate, ongoing dialogue with the divine part of yourself. And that divine part of yourself can navigate you through your career, through your art, through life. You can learn to be led through dreams and divination and your creative process. And third, come join us in Wealth. The application is on my website. It's carolyngraceelliott.com/wealth. You can find way more information and testimonials there and all sorts of fun stuff. So come on down.
And this is actually the perfect time to go inward. We are globally in some kind of a universal pause at the moment, where we are kind of forced to be with ourselves and dive deeper. I have really enjoyed the pandemic so far. As I've never felt so good in my skin, and you know, there's a lot of distractions that I cannot indulge in while we're in this period, and it has created a lot of deep peace for me. So I wish everyone stay healthy, stay strong, use the pandemic to go deeper within yourselves. Thank you, Carolyn, for your genius, and Kirsten, thank you very much for your unwavering support around this session.